It's strange how the human mind reacts to disaster. Whenever something catastrophic happens, like a plane crash, an unexpected death, or even a sudden global event, our first instinct isn't always to wait patiently for the facts. Instead, we start constructing explanations, sometimes far beyond what the actual evidence shows. And almost reflexively, many of us begin to entertain, or at least not rule out, conspiracy theories. Why does our brain do this? Why do we jump so quickly from confusion to complex plots, even when simpler answers stare us in the face? Let's look at this in the context of AI 171, the doomed flight out of Ahmedabad. At the heart of this reaction is a deeply wired need for order. From an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are finely tuned pattern-detecting machines. In the uncertain environments our ancestors faced, seeing connections, even illusory ones, was often safer than overlooking real threats. Spotting a predator in the bushes when there was none cost little. Missing a predator that was actually there could mean death. This evolutionary bias is still alive in us today. In modern life, that same cognitive machinery compels us to seek patterns and explanations for anything that feels random or frightening. There's also what psychologists call the proportionality bias, the intuitive sense that big events must have equally big causes. If a small bird crashes into your window and dies, it feels random and unimportant. But if an airliner with hundreds of people on board goes down, the scale of tragedy seems to demand an equally large explanation. A simple mechanical fault, a stuck fuel valve, or a software glitch somehow feels disproportionate to the loss. This psychological mismatch is fertile ground for conspiracies, because grand plots seem to balance the scales in a way that accidental failures don't. Neuroscience backs this up. Our brains constantly run on prediction error minimization. The cortex, especially networks tied to the anterior cingulate cortex and the prefrontal regions, works by generating expectations about the world. When reality violates those expectations, prediction errors arise, triggering discomfort and a need to update our mental models. Large, shocking violations, like a seemingly safe modern aircraft falling out of the sky, as was the case in AI 171, produced massive spikes in prediction error signals. The brain scrambles to close this gap, often by accepting more elaborate expectations or explanations, simply because they reduce uncertainty faster, even if they're unproven. In fact, there is a neurochemical incentive for embracing explanatory narratives. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure, it's also about seeking and curiosity. When we begin piecing together a story, especially one that feels hidden or exclusive, the dopaminergic system lights up. It rewards us for connecting dots, even if those dots don't objectively belong together. That's why speculation can feel so addictively satisfying, and why simple technical faults often seem dull compared to covert plots. Conspiracies engage our brain's reward circuits, giving us tiny neurological hits for solving a mystery, real or imagined. Then there's the discomfort of cognitive dissonance, as described by psychologist Leon Festinger. Holding two conflicting ideas, such as modern aviation is safe and hundreds just died on a routine flight, creates mental tension. Our minds rush to resolve it, and sometimes that means blaming institutions, believing they must be hiding something, because accepting that random, uncontrollable tragedies happen is far more unsettling. In essence, conspiracy theories often function as a psychological bomb, a way to protect ourselves from the terrifying possibility that life is more chaotic than we'd like to believe. Social psychology also plays a massive role. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments showed how easily people align their beliefs with the group, even against obvious evidence. Albert Bandura's social learning theory takes it further. We model what we see others do. When conspiratorial thinking becomes popular online, amplified by emotional posts and viral content, it gains legitimacy through sheer repetition. Observing others endorse a theory or seeing large numbers discuss it makes us more inclined to consider it too, because our brains treat social consensus as a shortcut for truth. Stanley Milgram's obedience studies provide another cautionary note. When information comes from perceived authority figures, whether it's a polished anchor on TV, a retired general, or an expert on social media with thousands of followers, we instinctively defer judgment. It's the same psychological reflex that led ordinary people in Milgram's study to administer shocks simply because a man in a lab coat told them to. In the realm of misinformation, charismatic voices can harness this bias, pushing people to embrace elaborate theories or ignore simpler explanations just because they seem authoritative. On a deeper philosophical level, all of this speaks to the human struggle with randomness. The ancient Stoics accepted the inherent unpredictability of life. They argued that true peace comes from recognizing how little is under our control. But most of us aren't Stoics. We crave narratives that make sense of tragedy. Even existentialists like Sartre recognize that humans are meaning-making creatures. So when something senseless happens, we almost instinctively reject "it just happened" as an explanation, reaching instead for stories, however implausible, that restore a sense of order. This is why, after a crash like the one Air India's Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner suffered, many people skip over the most basic investigative step, systematically ruling out improbable scenarios. Instead, our brains lean towards voluntarily forgetting to disprove elaborate plots. We spend energy building mental castles of speculation, layering on possible motives and shadowy actors, rather than taking Occam's razor seriously. It's not always because we're gullible, it's often because it feels psychologically safer and more meaningful than chaos. Well, there's a cost to letting our minds drift unchecked. When we nurture conspiratorial thinking, we make it harder for societies to respond to real problems. Resources are wasted chasing phantoms. Trust in institutions erodes. Meanwhile, the true, often simpler, technical causes of disasters go unaddressed. If a software glitch is behind multiple crashes, but we instead fixate on sabotage, critical safety reforms might never happen. In this way, our brain's craving for compelling stories can ironically leave us more vulnerable to future tragedies. So the next time you catch yourself weaving elaborate theories, pause for a moment. Recognize what your brain is doing. It's trying to comfort you, to make sense of uncertainty, to protect you from the raw horror of randomness. But meaning doesn't always come from stories. Sometimes it comes from understanding our own psychological machinery, from seeing how our neurons and biases pull us toward comforting illusions. And maybe, by seeing it clearly, we can do better next time. Thank you for watching The Brain Bubble. If you find this thought-provoking, stick around. There's always more going on inside your head than you think.